Today, we are going to discuss on the research article on the economic benefits of voluntary disclosure with particular reference to environmental disclosure. A sustainability report is a report published by a company or organization about the economic, environmental, and social impacts caused by its everyday activities. Sustainability reporting can help organizations to measure, understand, and communicate their economic, environmental, social, governance performance, and manage change more effectively. A sustainability report also is the key platform for communicating sustainability performance and impacts, whether it is positive or negative. Why is sustainability reporting important? This is because it ensures organizations to consider their impacts on sustainability issues and enables them to be transparent about the risks and opportunities they face. Stakeholders such as investors, customers, employees, suppliers, and public are more aware of the impact that businesses have on the economy, environment, and also society. The impact could be positive or negative. For an example, agriculture activities may create a positive economic, such as providing jobs, but at the same time, it may affect the environment, like haze generated from open burning. So basically, it is a useful management risk that builds trust among all the stakeholders. So what is the objective of sustainability reporting? It is to inform stakeholders so that they can use this information to help them in their opinion forming or decision making for their future well-being. Here is the example of a sustainable report taken from MAHB. The items disclosed in the sustainable report of MAHB are reporting and governance, their practice in sensible economics, environmental consciousness like energy, water, carbon emissions, and how they create an inspiring workplace, how community-friendly organization they are, and airport experience. All of the information disclosed in MAHB's sustainable report is to make sure the stakeholders can grow with them and build sustainable businesses together over the long term. So now we will talk about the background of our research article. Nowadays, voluntary disclosure has become a common practice in companies. What is voluntary disclosure? Voluntary disclosure defined as free choices on the part of company managements to provide accounting and other information deemed relevant to the decision needs of users of their annual reports. The purpose they do voluntary disclosures is to inform more about their company's information to the public so that stakeholders have a clear view of the long-term sustainability of the company. However, there are costs associated with voluntary disclosure. Basically, FASB classified voluntary disclosures into 6 categories, which are business data, analysis of business data, forward-looking information, information about management and shareholders, company background, and information about intangible assets. These are the examples of the voluntary disclosure. First is business data. For example, the breakdown of market share growth and information on new products. Second, analysis of business data. For example, trend analysis and comparisons with competitors. Third, forward-looking information. For example, sales forecast breakdown and plans for expansion. Fourth, information about management and shareholders. For example, information on stockholders and creditors and shareholding breakdown. Fifth is the company background. Example is the product description and long-term objectives. And the last one is the information about intangible assets. For example, research and development and customer relations. We have selected one business review titled Benefits of Telling All Voluntary Disclosure, which investigating the incentives of companies who use voluntary disclosure. The information are provided through the prior research on the economic consequences, benefits of voluntary accounting disclosure, and the economic consequences of environmental. So now we are going to discuss deeper about the selected research article which investigate about the reason companies performs voluntary disclosure despite its cost. But before that, there has always been an issue of information asymmetry and agency conflicts which impede the efficient allocation of resources in a capital market economy. What is information asymmetry? Asymmetric information occurs when one party to an economic transaction possesses greater material knowledge than the other party. What is agency conflicts? Agency problem is a conflict of interest inherent in any relationship where one party is expected to act in the best interest of another. To mitigate this problem, it can be done by increasing the level of corporate disclosure, which is voluntary disclosure. Voluntary disclosure representing sharing of non-financial information, including as ethical, environmental, and social issues by an organization's management beyond requirements. The example of voluntary disclosure are management forecasts, analyst presentations, press release, and other corporate reports. From the research articles, the results showed the main reason for many companies to engage in voluntary disclosures is that it brings economic benefits. Mainly, based on the article, the researchers have identified 5 factors that provide incentive for managements continue in voluntary disclosures, which is cost of capital, stock performance, stock compensation plan, litigation cost, management talent signaling. First is cost of capital. The perceptions of investors are important to the corporate managers who look forward to issuing equity or public debt or even to obtaining another company in a stock transaction. Information asymmetry causes problems for the companies such as higher cost of debts or public equity. Therefore, managers would provide voluntary disclosure to reduce the information asymmetry problem as well as reduce the company cost of external financing to make capital market transactions. This is an incentive for managers to make voluntary disclosure for economic benefit. Stock compensation. There are different stock-based compensation plans, such as stock option grants and stock appreciation right, which are used as a basis of computing managers' compensations. These compensation plans shows the motives for managers to employ voluntary disclosures for 2 reasons. First reason is that the manager are interested to disclose private information to meet limitations enforced by insider trading rules and to increase liquidity of the firm's stock in order to trade their own stock holdings. Secondly, some manager may consider the interest of existing stockholders and provide voluntary disclosure to decrease contracting costs related to stock compensation for new employees. It is evident that there is an association between managers' disclosure decision and their stock-based compensation. For example, companies make opportunistic voluntary disclosures which maximize their stock option compensation. Next is litigation cost. Companies may have incentives to increase voluntary disclosure because of the legal actions against managers for inadequate or untimely disclosures. Therefore, managers' disclosure decision may be affected by the fear of shareholders' litigation. Even the management's motive to provide disclosure, especially forward-looking information, is also reduced by litigation. One of the researchers of the article named Douglas J. Skinner has found strong evidence that show the association between managers' earning disclosure and litigation. Now is management talent signaling. One of the researchers, Brad Truman, has indicated that there is an incentive for talent managers to make voluntary earning forecasts to disclose their kind. This provides investors a more positive assessment of a manager's ability to predict economic environmental charges and to alter production plans accordingly. It can be said that economic consequences or economic effects of voluntary disclosures are the main reasons for the voluntary disclosures by the company. So now we will look into the environmental disclosure. So what is environmental disclosure? It increases the interest in the economic performance reporting by the companies and are a means of communicating to the stakeholders about the impact of the organization's actions on the environment. Why do companies engage in environmental disclosure? This is because it increases environmental awareness and expectations of firms regarding companies' activities. Next is increasing in public concern about the social and environmental effects of corporate activities. It also increases in stringent sanctions against certain type of corporate activities. And the last one is it increases in the number of the moral or ethical investors who believe they should avoid investing in certain classes of corporations which cause social or environmental injuries. So who will be affected? Investors' investment decision-making and also the stock market performance. For example, let's say there is a pollution recently. Regarding its pollution, the rational firm will voluntarily engage in costly activities abating its pollution externalities. The firm will then disclose to both its product and capital markets the fact of its actions, which is the abatement activities, precisely so as to differentiate itself and thereby to increase its market value. The argument is that public concerns in regard to the environment affect companies' strategies and eventually their market values. So now, what does the literature on the voluntary disclosures suggest? It suggested that economic benefits are the main reason for many companies to disclose their environmental issues voluntarily. There are other factors such as litigation, legal fees, and legitimacy that encourage or in some cases enforce companies to be involved in such activities, but all of them finally may have economic costs or consequences for the companies which influence companies' disclosure policies and strategies. So now we will look into the general costs and advantages of voluntary disclosure. So what is disclosure? Disclosure is the communication of economic information, whether financial or non-financial, quantitative or otherwise, concerning a company's financial position and performance. Disclosure consists of two types, which are mandatory and voluntary disclosure. Mandatory disclosure consists of information disclosed in order to comply with the requirements of laws and regulations, while for voluntary disclosure as free choices on the part of company managements to provide accounting and other information deemed relevant to the decision needs of users of their annual reports. So what is the advantages of voluntary disclosure? One of the main goals of voluntary disclosure is to better communicate company's value to its potential investors. As more information is available, investors can easily recognize the value and predict future performance, lowering the risk of the investment. It also should increase their willingness to invest, especially if they see the company as a good business opportunity. Voluntary disclosure aims to improve the fluidity of capital market and push towards more efficient allocation of capital, bringing the average cost down. High level of voluntary disclosure will result in more complex and positive communication with its stakeholders. Voluntary disclosures also entail some negative consequences. It makes the management double think the decision whether it is worth for the company's interest to disclose more than the government requires in mandatory statements. There are 5 main aspects pulling away from voluntary disclosure. First is disclosure precedent. Once the company decides to voluntarily disclose its internal information, it is really hard to back off. Managers are afraid that if they decide towards voluntary disclosure in the future, they will be pushed to continue doing so. It would not be so bad if the additional information would be always good. In case of poor performance or bad times management, probably would rather just keep the information for themselves or simply would not be too proud of sharing it. Second is litigation costs. Litigation hypothesis has two possible outcomes on voluntary disclosure. One affects it positively, driving managers towards increased voluntary disclosure. The other one has negative impact, preventing the management of sharing too much. Managers are pushed away from voluntary disclosure because of the lack of willingness to share their private forward-looking speculations. It would have stronger impact in case when the manager could be penalized for bad speculations. In case of the fear of litigation, managers prefer not to share that much in order to avoid unnecessary conflicts. Third is proprietary cost hypothesis. One of the reasons why firms are not willing to voluntarily disclose more information than necessary is the threat of losing their competitive advantage. Even though the additional information would decrease the cost of capital, many times the manager prefer to keep the internal information within the company and pay a premium for getting external financing. Proprietary cost hypothesis can negatively affect voluntary disclosure of information because of management's fear of revealing too much and losing their competitive position in the market. The fourth is the agency cost. Managers decide to avoid unnecessary attention from the stakeholders. Limiting voluntary disclosure of unimportant information would save many not desirable questions and comments, leading to faster decision-making process and saving agency costs. The last one is political costs. For own comfort, managers would prefer not to disclose that much in order to limit the amount of information that can be used against them. The level of impact of political costs depends on the size of the company. Big companies with a high level of profits are more likely to decrease the level of voluntary disclosure. It is mainly to avoid being involved in any political attacks. So that's all from our team, and thank you for watching.